So shall we do a take one of that?
Yeah.
That you can cut in and use if necessary.
Yeah, let's do that. So are you recording your audio now?
I'm recording everything as far as I know, but you know.
My version of
I am recording.
My version of you shutting the window was I've switched off my mum's fridge freezer because it was loud. So if I don't remember to turn that back on at the end of the recording, that's going to be trouble. Okay.
At the end of this recording, I will say, please turn the freezer back on.
Yeah, that could be like just a weird, I've got blisters on my fingers thing that no one else will understand.
Please turn the freezer back on.
There you go. Okay, yeah. So I'll start. So it's unknowingly, isn't it? I'm going to forget the name of the podcast throughout. Welcome to And Ninthly,
an Inside Number 9 podcast.
With your host, me, David.
And me, John.
Well, hello, John.
Hello, David.
Good start.
It's a classic start, if you don't mind me saying. It's a textbook start.
Yeah, it bodes very well. So firstly, I should explain what we're here to do and a bit of background to why we've got together to do it. So I have been doing a show called the Scapegoat Podcast, which I think a lot of listeners to this will be familiar with, for about 2 years. And John has been a guest on that several times. And that show is about various topics, and John's been on talking about quite a few topics now. But a few of the episodes of that have been about the British sort of comedy drama anthology show Inside Number 9, written by Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton, which is just beginning its 7th series on BBC television. And I'll put the links in the show notes, but the episodes of the Scapegoat Podcast, you're very welcome to check them out. There's been one recorded in 2020, which was sort of a overview and highlights and discussion of series 1 to 5, which were the ones that were out then. And then we reconvened in 2021 to do a kind of fresh take on series 6, which aired in 2021. And we did that in 2 parts. So we did like episodes 1 to 3 in one big chunk of podcast, and then episodes 4 to 6 in another chunk. So those are all available on all the usual channels. So I'll put the links to those if you want to sort of catch up with what me and John have already said about Inside Number 9. But we're basically here to talk about Series 7, which has just started on UK TV in April 2022 as we're recording this. In fact, it was on 2 nights ago. Oh, sorry, a night ago, wasn't it? On yesterday.
Just slightly under 24 hours ago, as I look at the timestamp. We're 23 hours and 45 minutes ago that it aired.
Yeah, so this is a really fresh take. This is episode 1 of Series 7.
You may say fresh take. I may say 23 hours and 45 minutes of thinking about it.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. I've been mulling over it quite a bit. We'll talk about the specifics in a bit. Just to establish, John, have you seen this? I've seen this twice now. Have you seen this twice?
As of about 10 minutes ago, yes, I've seen this twice.
Not bad for 23 hours, I think.
It's a good effort. I've always been. Side note. I've always been a great hater of watching things on phones, but being late and being on a train made me realise, actually, the phone's there. It's available. It's on the iPlayer. Why not watch it? And there it was.
Yeah, so you could see it.
Yeah, the first time I saw it on a nice big TV. The second time I saw it on a screen the size of my hand.
Yeah, that's nice. Martin Scorsese would approve, I'm sure.
Well, David Lynch specifically. Don't watch films on your fucking phone.
Yeah,
I believe is
yeah, it's the sort of classic thing for old man yells at cloud film directors now to get slightly annoyed about.
But do you know what? It's fine. I didn't mind it. I wouldn't choose to do it the first time round, but I didn't mind it. Which is weird, because I feel like this is one of those. Maybe it's a TV thing. I feel like it's a thing where actually the cinematography is interesting enough that it's a good idea to watch it on a bigger screen, but actually the cinematography and the script and the performances are somehow more combined to say that it sort of doesn't matter if you're watching it on a laptop, you're watching it on a phone, you're watching it. What other options are there on a watch? Can you watch it on a watch now?
In your own memory.
Yeah, in one of those like Black Mirror type things that you get on your temples. Do we have those yet?
No, I think I'll check. Maybe during the time of recording they've been launched. Yes. Let's talk about the specifics of the episode in a second, but I was just going to ask briefly about your sort of experience of watching it, given that we did these like quite soon after reviews of Series 6 last year. Were you kind of watching this either on first or second viewing with a different feeling that, you knew, obviously we did a bit of, we rehearsed this last year obviously a bit, but and the kind of what you have to look out for when you're going to talk about them, hopefully somewhat intelligently, but did that sort of, were you feeling a bit self-aware watching it the first time? You're like, oh, noted, that kind of thing, because I think I was a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. I think I was for maybe about the first minute, and then I think gonna give them all a compliment now. I think actually that sort of dissipates whatever your reasons for watching, whether you think I'm going to enjoy this, I'm not going to enjoy this, I know nothing about this, I'm watching this so I can talk about it on a podcast, whatever your reasons for watching it might be. I think after a minute or so, they're such engaging writers and very, very good storytellers that you kind of abandon all of that. And just lose yourself in the story and lose yourself in, suspension of disbelief. So I was conscious of watching it and thinking I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, but in a way that was quite a nice experience because it disappeared quite quickly, and I think that's testament to what they do and to the strength of the writing and the strength of the performances, that you very soon lose the world that you are in to be absorbed in the world that they are in. That's kind of the best compliment I can pay it, I guess.
Yeah, I think I said during our Series 6 episodes that none of these drag for me. Whatever I think the individual qualities of them are, they all seem to really zip along, and I think I found that definitely with this one as well. I think I had the thing about knowing I was recording about it. When we did it last year, we recorded first after episode 3, and we basically compared the first 3 episodes. And I think when it was almost like doing the podcast equivalent of looking at like the tyranny of the blank page this morning, I was like, what am I going to say about this? I was kind of like, this is harder because although I've got all the previous Inside Number 9 episodes to sort of contrast it with and think about, I haven't actually seen what they're setting the stall out with this series yet. So I think I felt a bit of that. So on my rewatch, I sometimes don't feel like I really need to do a rewatch, at least not for this sort of thing. I really did today, so I was really glad I had time to, because I actually took a few notes, which I'm usually quite note light, but I was kind of, I actually need to know what to say about this, because I certainly know the impact it had on me and the feelings it gave me and stuff. But I was kind of, I'm not sure if I really took a lot of that in the way that I actually need to, at least on a basic level, just to talk about it with you. But yeah, I'm glad I got the opportunity to do that. But I should say, so Merrily is notable even in the pre-publicity for the series for featuring a League of Gentlemen.
Spoilers.
Yes, there's spoilers within for all of this. We should have mentioned that at the start, yeah. We will be spoiling this episode in its entirety, and there won't particularly be a spoiler-free segment of this, although obviously we'll touch on some things later on, but spoilers from now on in, possibly. So Mark Gatiss is in this, and it's Are you saying you're saying Gatiss and not Gattis? Yeah, I think that is a bit of a tomato kind of thing, isn't it? In the sense that one of them's right and one of them's wrong.
Well, it's a bit of a northerner southerner, but sure, if you want to call it that.
Gatiss. I tend to say Gatiss, I think.
I'd say Gattis.
Well, he's only in this one, so at least this controversy isn't going to last long on this podcast.
Until he weighs in.
Did you you've not had the chance to listen to the Inside Number 9 BBC Sounds show about this yet, have you?
Oh, no, I have not. Do they clear up the whole Gatis Gatis thing?
It'd be weird if that was the first time it'd come up for them. We've just been winging it, you know.
We'd like to put this on record once and for all.
Yeah, it's pronounced Guipit.
Chumley Warner.
Yeah, exactly. I listened to about half of it, and they had Diane Morgan, who's also in this episode, on it, and they interviewed her like separately. The two of them interviewed Diane Morgan, and then they had Gates on, so I'd started listening through to some of that, and they were obviously dealing with some of the things like, I'll let you listen to it yourself, obviously, and if anyone wants to go listen to it, I'll put that in the show notes as well, but they were talking about some of the obvious stuff you'd expect them to talk about their Bretton Hall days, you know, because for people who don't know, you know, Reece, Shearsmith, Steve Pemberton and Mark Gates were all at drama school together, and obviously Merrily involves a university reunion, so they were talking a bit about that and about little sort of in-jokes, minor in-jokes they'd worked into the script and things like that. You know, I'm not just going to rehash that thing I just listened to, so I'll let everyone listen to that for the details. But one thing that intrigued me was they mentioned that it wasn't written, like the basic premise of the episode and the characters basically were all in place by the time they got Gatiss involved. So it wasn't written, the union reunion thing was come up with first, and then it was like, oh, it'd be neat if Mark was involved in this, and they got him, you know. So it wasn't the other way around.
That's very interesting, because one reading of this could be that, you know, three guys who went to university or drama school together maybe don't see each other as often as they used to, or we perceive that they don't, because, you know, Pemberton and Shearsmith are doing stuff together, and Gatiss is off doing, you know, Doctor Who, Sherlock, carte blanche to do whatever he wants. So I don't know, maybe we fill in the gaps of, well, do these guys, you know, go around to each other's houses for dinner anymore? How often do they see each other socially? Have they fallen out of touch? So it's very easy to impose that level of our perception of what their personal lives and professional lives are like onto this. So I didn't realise that. That's very interesting to know that they'd written it without him in mind, and then thought, oh well, he could play this part. And also, it's just to dive straight in here, it's, you know, if you're going to get Mark Gatiss, in, it's not a obviously showy, silly voice kind of a part. If you understand what I mean, it's quite an underplayed. I mean, they're all playing, you know, quite real life, everyday characters, including him, rather than, you know, wearing lots of makeup and doing lots of silly. It's not a gothic horror, which maybe you'd imagine that, you know, if they'd got him back on board for a few days for an episode, that they'd go full on, let's go mad, macabre, gothic horror. But they don't. They just do something quite everyday and quite rational and touchable in terms of ordinary everyday experience, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, although not entirely. Obviously, we'll talk about that. And I think some of the ambiguities there are deliberate, and actually, again, I sort of wish I'd listened to Inside Number 9, because I think, again, it's one of the situations where I got some ambiguities out of it that then they briefly talk about. They tend to talk more about the production and things like that when they're talking in those shows, but some of the ambiguities I found in it, they were like, oh yeah, I suppose people could find those. We didn't really mean that. so that's, and not that spoils it for me, but I just, you know, it's interesting when they have those little spots. I think we talked about some of those on the previous episodes.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. Having not heard that, I've got a list of ambiguities written down right here. And I wonder if any of those they've just gone, nah, we didn't think about that.
I'll tell you if we hit any, basically based on what I heard. But yeah, it's the other thing I meant to say. Yeah, so I won't rehash their production stuff because it is quite interesting. But you know, it's mostly about the filming and particularly the challenges of filming outdoors and things like that, and on water. But in terms of the creative personnel involved on this, you know how Diane Morgan is probably still best known in sort of British comedy for playing Philomena Kunk originally on the Charlie Brooker stuff, right?
I am aware of that, David, as you well know.
Yeah. No, I'm going somewhere with this. So the director of it, I forget his name, but it's the bloke who plays Barry Shippeas.
No.
Yeah, who apparently, so I'm doing him a disservice there, I should look him up before
No.
the end of the podcast, but apparently he's quite an accomplished TV director and does a bunch of stuff and has directed another episode coming up this series, apparently, but that's the guy. So there's another little reunion going on sort of behind the camera in that sense.
Standby caller. I'm looking this up immediately. That's genuinely exciting to me.
Yeah, so weird. I didn't know. I'd never looked him up and seen what else he did basically. So that's interesting.
I can feel you baiting me into talking about my hatred of Philomena Kunk. Do you know what? I liked Diane Morgan in this. I'm going to go back to that first. I like Diane Morgan in this. I have an issue with Philomena Kunk in that as she became more and more prevalent during Screen Wipe, News Wipe, etc. When they gave her the Moment of Wonder section at the end of every episode, whatever season that was, that was it. That was the end of the show for me. It was, going to be 4 or 5 minutes of Philomena Kunk, mishearing what a clever person has said and making a double entendre out of it, which admittedly is what I like to do in my daily life. But somehow it seemed, if I say unsophisticated, that makes me sound like an enormous arsehole. But it just seemed really, really obvious that, at some point someone was just going to say something that sounded phallic and she was gonna run with it. It was the same joke over and over again.
Well, we could spend far too much time with this talking about this, aren't we? But it's anyway, yeah, very, very much up to the individual conscience. But Diane Morgan, yeah, I enjoyed her in this as well.
They obviously understand the significance of having Mark Gatiss rejoin them. It has a certain fanboy significance. I like the idea that they thought, well, that's going to derail it, potentially. That could potentially not take it where we want to take it. So we need someone else. We need an external factor. We need something to make it. And I think Diane Morgan being there makes it a story that you can believe in. Actually, I think that's, very, very clever and very significant that they get someone else in who is not even someone, as far as I know, who's worked with them before or been on screen with them before, that makes it feel like this is something new. This is a new dynamic that's happening for the first time, and therefore we can forget about the ramifications of, it's the League of Gentlemen back together. And I think the fact, again, that they're doing something quite everyday and quotidian and, hesitate to say ordinary, but kind of real world, nothing, again, I say nothing fantastical about it, we'll come back to that, but I think that means that they have intentionally shied away from the whole League of Gentlemen aesthetic from that world, and they've done something intentionally quite different, and I think she's a big part of that.
I agree, but I think she, as an actress being there, and the character she's playing as well, I should name some of the characters, but yes, she's playing Donna. She also allows them to lean into some of that League stuff, and there was just two things I wanted to highlight there. Was one is that she allows them to, because she's playing the sort of, sort of relatively unintelligent, uneducated, undereducated, younger girlfriend character, and she's also quite crude, nice but crude about various things. It allows them to go to the sort of scatological places, and kind of not just in terms of her actions and her language, but in terms of their reaction to it, and some kind of like bawdiness, that the League of Gentlemen was, that was a flavour that made up the League of Gentlemen, definitely, that was all in there. It allowed them to do a bit of that in terms of some of the double entendres and the sort of dialogue in general. But the other thing that's not so much about her was, that I was thinking back to the League of Gentlemen, was I was thinking, like, is this reminiscent of any particular sort of area of the League of Gentlemen? And it sort of reminded me a little bit of, the sketches they did with Reece Shearsmith playing Jeff, and I think the other two were playing Brian and Mike, and they were basically three businessmen. The most famous example of those being, him basically pulling out the gun on them in the restaurant, and forcing them to tell the joke. But that dynamic of the three middle-aged men who all have the shared past and went to school together and stuff, and have all ended up in different stages of satisfaction with their lives and everything. And I thought where that fed in is because obviously this episode involves Reece Shearsmith having secrets from the others and being possibly at a lower ebb than the other two, although they've all got their own stuff going on. It struck me that he's actually playing the kind of, because he's the one trying to make everyone get along. He's the peacemaker. He's concocted this reunion in the first place. He's kind of like a more functional Jeff in that sense. You know what I mean? Like he's at a terribly low ebb like Jeff often was, but he's not got the rage and everything. He's instead just deeply, deeply sad. But it reminded me in that sense of that dynamic.
I now just dream that one day someone describes me as a functional Jeff.
It's a good band name. We are Functional Jeff. I was just going to say, I was talking about the production side of it, but this was just something I noticed when the episode was starting. There's this really nice strings music throughout the key points throughout the episode that's quite haunting, and it's quite interesting. Given the sort of lake setting and everything, it feels like redolent of water flowing and things like that. But I knew it was reminding me of another Inside Number 9 episode, but there was a specific thing it was reminding me of, and I think it's because I noticed it in the original episode. You remember the season 5 episode, The Stakeout, which is the one in the cop car with the two of them. That's got, I haven't rewatched it for this, but that's got music very reminiscent of this. Like almost so you could almost use that soundtrack on this episode and not change much.
Yeah, well, do you know what? I'll confirm or deny that soon, but I looked him up actually at the end of the second rewatch. It's Christian Henson, because it's the music is phenomenal for this episode. It's absolutely perfect. It's very there's been a bit of a trend lately of kind of ethereal, slightly spooky string music. And it seemed very reminiscent of that. It seemed very on point, but is really, really affecting.
It certainly, I think, takes a cue from that, or lands in the same place, which is interesting, because that's another one about, I don't think this is deliberate, but it's another one of them being trapped in a vehicle, specifically.
Yeah.
There's a funny bit on the Inside Number 9 podcast where they talk about the difficulties they went through in getting a pedalo set up in the way that they'd written the episode. So apparently it was extraordinarily difficult to get a pedalo where the basic thing is there's two sets of people both facing forwards. Apparently because they could only get pedalos where you're in them and you're basically like in a rowing boat, you're basically like face two pairs of people facing each other. And they were thinking like, well, if we can only get that, we'll need to rewrite the whole episode because they'll be relating to each other in a completely different way. And I thought that was interesting. I guess let's talk about a few specifics in a sec. But what was let's sort of do a quick reaction then. Like, what did you think of this episode? Did you like it?
I did very much, actually. I mean, lovely to have them back, isn't it? I think we said that at the point we were talking about season 6. It's just nice to have them back. It's nice to have something reliable in the endless stream of mediocre TV that is going to push some buttons. It's kind of like when you know someone who knows you well enough that they're always going to find something to intrigue you or piss you off or make you laugh or amuse you, and that's what they do every time. They seem to do that very, very frequently. So by and large, it's just, I'm almost certainly going to enjoy this on some level because it's just good to have it back. And to have new episodes of this back and to see what they've been up to and to see what they've been thinking and what they've been creating, and whether they're reflecting the world that we've all found ourselves living in over the last few years in any new or profound or touching way that's going to relate to me. That's a really obfuscating way of saying I liked it, David. I liked it.
Yeah, it's tough when we're doing this before any other episodes, isn't it? So we can't say where it stands in the series or anything like that.
But and I kind of don't care. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it is that tough thing of also, is this their album opening track? So it's hard to know, is there going to be You know, is track 2 going to be a bit more low key or a bit weirder? Is track 3 going to be the ballad? Is like, do you know what? You know what I mean? Where are they going to go from this? And obviously we don't know that, and we can't talk about it. I found it quite moving, quite touching. I think comedically, I think they've set up a dynamic that is, whether this says anything about their dynamic between Shearsmith, Pemberton, and Gatiss. Like, a lot of the comedy was very broad, was very scatological. They were going for a lot of, Donna is going to set up, jokes about pissing and scatology, and that's what they're going to run with. And I might argue that the pedo pedalo joke is a bit laboured and maybe a bit naff, possibly, but
quite broad.
They play it long enough, and they bounce off it enough that it works in those ways.
Well, I've got a few things, right. So I do now quite like it. I think I was left a bit. Didn't think it's bad, but I think I was left a bit overall slightly unimpressed by the first viewing. I think second viewing I've made a bit more peace with elements of it, but I think it also feels a bit sort of like you're negging yourself, doesn't it? When you say I found it confusing, because it always makes you feel like you're just at least when you're doing it for an audience, like just that you just missed the point of something, or you just didn't pick up on things and weren't paying attention or anything like that. I think what I mean by that is there's a few elements of the very scant plot, but the bits that are there and the bits that sort of suggested to be important to especially Shearsmith's character's actions, I was a bit like, does that work? Because I know they're going into, especially in terms of the ending, which we'll talk about specifically, but like it's more playing on the level of just being a sort of poetic and being romantic and dreamlike at the end and everything like that. But there were a few bits that I didn't, as I said, we'll be spoiling this whole episode, so I could just mention a couple of them, right? So you might be able to illuminate me, because one of them's just I guess factual plot thing, and I rewatched it twice and I still wasn't sure about the implications of this. So when they get, I think it's I made a note, so it's just over halfway through the episode when they're in the pedalo and they get stuck in the reeds. Is that deliberate on Shearsmith's part? I mean, is he getting them stuck in the weeds?
No, I don't think he is. That even on the second rewatch, that didn't occur to me, is that this guy has a plan, and his plan is as simple as he's going to take his wife's ashes to the island where he proposed to her, and then he's going to let off some fireworks, and he's going to get back in the pedalo and go home. The whole thing is just a horrible accident. All of it. I think them getting stuck in the weeds is the outside factor, is the thing that throws everything, that makes it tragic, that results in certainly his death and possibly the death of the other three. Discuss in a moment.
Oh, this is so interesting, right? Because the second thing I was going to bring up is I think you've probably you actually have understood this on a more fundamentally intelligent level than I have, at least for this aspect, because I was going to say my next thing was going to be if he was wanting to kill himself, if he was wanting to join his wife in the afterlife, is hoping to die of hypothermia the way one would do it.
That's my first thought. So it's the shock moment where he jumps overboard, and also they've set it up. They do it twice, so they've already set up Mark Gatiss as a doctor. And he makes a reference to hypothermia when they get stuck in the weeds, and it's like, you can't go in the water there. You get hypothermia.
You could be dead in 20 minutes. Yeah.
But they then do it again when Gary is threatening to jump overboard to go and save him. They then throw out this kind of hypothermia thing.
Yeah.
And then you've got Lawrence sat in front of the shrine to Bonnie, and he's shivering, he doesn't look well, and you kind of, like, the word hypothermia just kind of creeps into your brain, and you kind of go, oh, well, he's clearly got hypothermia, he's going to be dead in 20 minutes, but what's going to happen to the other guys? But I don't think it's not his intention at all. His intention is genuinely, he's a good guy, he's a nice guy, he's not trying to kill himself, he's just trying to, he's just trying to create some kind of memorial to Bonnie, and then they'll go back. And it is actually the fact that they get stuck in the weeds that actually throws the whole thing into disarray. My question about that plot point is why they sit there for so long. That's the issue, is, it gets dark. They talk about how it's going to be properly dark in half an hour, and they do nothing for seemingly ages through the cuts.
Yeah, for hours.
And then they come back to them, and then he goes in, and then all hell breaks loose, and then they kind of sit there and wait for him. And in terms of credulity, that's the only hole I would punch, is the idea of that they all just sit there kind of willingly going along with it. Like, they're in the middle of nowhere with no one around, so like, you wouldn't just sit there and go, well, someone will probably turn up. You'd have to start talking about taking serious action.
Yeah. So a few things there. I think it feels like it's, because they're already stretching the conceit of Inside Number 9 by having them outdoors, but in a vessel that's labelled 9. So maybe they thought that, them leaving, let's say they observed the fireworks with him on the island, that would just stretch the deliberate limitation of Inside Number 9 to nothing, if they kind of move the plot on in that way. Also, of course, you need, if you're going to do the ending they do, you need a sort of reason to separate him from them and create that ambiguity and those sort of different states and everything. And I think it's really funny, actually, because it really isn't a very plotty episode, but this thing about Inside Number 9 episodes going so quickly, I actually thought it went, this is probably isn't a criticism, bit too quickly. Like, it almost just felt like, there wasn't enough time to draw out some of this stuff. I guess this is an episode that if the show's I don't want it to not be a half-hour show, but this is one where I could see spending 45 minutes in the company of these characters and these actors,
Yeah, possibly. I'm wondering if they had the dimensionality for that, and this is me having started by saying I really enjoyed it, and wondering if actually they wouldn't. I don't think they'd survive over more than 28 minutes, because actually I think they're tropes in a way. I think, and it's interesting in terms of the tropes that they choose to assign to each of them. So Pemberton is doing his crass northerner that we see him do very often, and Shearsmith is doing his slightly uptight, clipped accent. I'm a bit more intelligent than everyone gives me credit for, etc. Yeah. And Gatiss is doing his, I'm actually the smart one, I'm actually the most successful one. And I think that's a dynamic that we often have seen them play, particularly Shearsmith and Pemberton in various episodes of Inside Number 9. Though obviously they're quite interchangeable, and then they bring in this proper lowest common denominator that elevates them all slightly.
So I know I made a note. So at the 17-minute mark is when Shearsmith says the body's dead line, reveals that his wife has passed away, and tells them at least the basics of when that happened and why that happened. I'm
going to put that on my graph, by the way, of where the twist comes.
Yeah, definitely do, yeah. But I wondered, because he seems so eager to discuss kids with Gatiss. When Gatiss mentions it, his ears perk up, and Shearsmith looks so not delighted, but like relieved, as like, here's another parent I can talk to about this stuff. And he seems really deflated when it's dogs and not kids. And because he talks about, I presume this is meant to be true, but like, he talks about his kids being like away now at uni, right? Being old enough to, he refers to himself as one of his empty nest parents,
Yeah.
And then of course when you find out that he's also a widower, struggling with pretty much every aspect of that, you kind of think it's like another nice little hint at the character, isn't it? That he's, on one level, he might not be at this extreme and this sort of desperate feeling if he just had another dad to talk to, And both these characters are dad, or consider themselves dads, and they are his, as he says, heartbreakingly, still his best friends, even though he hasn't spoken to them in 12 years.
Yeah, but Gary's got kids. Like again, it's thrown away. But
Mm.
he asked Gary about when he last saw his kids, and Gary has a completely different relationship where he says, "Oh, I don't see them as much as I like," and he's obviously an absentee father, or he's separated from seeing his children very often. So he could go there, but he doesn't, because that's not the level of parental engagement he wants to engage with.
It's almost like this Shearsmith character, nice though he seems, and obviously wants to reconnect with his friends. It's like he wouldn't see Pemberton's character as like a font of wisdom, whereas he might look up to Gates's character, based on their prior friendship.
Yeah.
For that kind of thing. I was wondering. So yeah, I was thinking about the social media side of it, because he talks both about trying to get them on. I think they mentioned Facebook, but they certainly mentioned LinkedIn, which is kind of comic tragic, because people trying to make real connections over LinkedIn, I've always found kind of slightly silly, but I know people do actually use it for that kind of thing. And it was making me think of like older quasi-social networks, websites like Friends Reunited, in the sort of early noughties, and they were even just talking about Shearsmith's character sending out those like round robin emails, those kind of those things. I mean, that's quite an old idea, isn't it? The couples who used to send out like Christmas letters, to kind of update people on what had happened to them during the year, but the idea that he's just whether in social media terms or sort of more old-fashioned formats, that the character's just sort of firing off these updates into the ether to people he still wants to be friends with, and for different reasons they're not responding. It's very tragic, but it sort of felt very modern as well,
It did. I found this really interesting, particularly on the second rewatch. It leapt out to me slightly more because he specifically mentions they were at university in 1989. I haven't fact checked that. I don't know. Was that the year they were at Bretton Hall? Maybe. But the idea of that was a very different world where you met friends and you formed personal relationships in a very, very different way, and you're now not necessarily forced, but well, maybe you are forced. Like that's how you maintain relationships is through digital communication, and it's largely through email and WhatsApp and Facebook and social media and all of these things. And that's unless you meet up with someone regularly, unless you live near someone regularly. Now, a lot of the people I went to university with, my relationships with them are now largely predicated on digital communication because they don't live near me, so I don't see them very often. And the way that that's changed how those personal relationships develop and are maintained, I think actually is there's something very interesting there in terms of what he's talking about, what Lawrence is talking about, how he had this enormous earth-shattering news, but he no longer had enough of a personal face-to-face connection with them that he could say, let's go for a drink, or, come and stay for the weekend. Like, those things aren't necessarily now what you do when you have huge earth-shattering news. What you do is you email people and you put up Facebook posts, and that's how you report your huge earth-shattering news, be it births, deaths, weddings, whatever. And I found that quite interesting and actually quite touching and profound that they were exploring that idea of we're this age where when we met, when we became friends, when we became best friends, whether we believe that to be the case or not, there was no digital communication, there was no social media. It was I'd phone you, you'd phone me, we'd meet up face to face, that's it. And now it's like they are trapped in also trying to navigate this world, this completely changed world, and they don't know how to do it any more than I know how to do it. And I found that really fascinating and also quite touching.
Yeah, I think quite relatable in some ways. I think, and it's
relatable, hugely relatable. Yeah.
and also for those people who are a bit older than us, who maybe it's not just that they're like all of us are navigating these kind of WhatsApp friendships and what the proper way to conduct them is and to maintain them, but some of the slightly older people than us who just didn't get the channels started in the first place, never got into them, like Gates's character, and just kind of they almost wouldn't know how to use these channels if they did have them. It's interesting. I one thing that I thought was part of that, I guess, was the 1989 thing might be when they were at uni together. I also just thought there's a throwaway line. He's like, "You haven't missed much," and that's actually where they reference Game of Thrones and the Game of Thrones ending. I wanted to come back to that, but I just thought it's ridiculous because we think of 1989 as being such a seismic global year after which a ton of stuff changed, and then they were just like, "You haven't missed much." It was the entire world has changed in massive ways, in a lot of senses. Of course, the Game of Thrones ending joke made me think of Simon Says from last series, but because in that episode, as we talked about at the time, they're riffing a lot on endings and proper endings of things and how people could be shortchanged by endings or not get the endings that they wanted, and that obviously that leads Shearsmith to mutter that he's not going to do that. He's not going to be like the Game of Thrones writers, is the implication. He's going to give Bonnie this proper ending, and this is just before the Bonnie reveal, actually, and that's the point where it comes closest to this sort of malevolent feeling, doesn't it? But the reason I mentioned that when we talk about maintaining friendships is it takes the nice sort of horror undertones of the riverbank isolated setting and all the glimpses of what turns out to be this boatman. We'll talk about him a bit more in a second, but you learn basically it's this sort of tragicomic thing where he has ambushed his friends. He has ambushed his friends like in a horror movie. He's got them to this place under false pretenses. He has been keeping things from them, but all he's been keeping them from them is this quite intense but essentially nice, benevolent ritual that he wants to share with them because he can't, because he can't tell them that up front,
Yeah, you're right. It does have a kind of horror structure about it, doesn't it? In terms of he's got this bombshell that he knows he's got and he's going to drop, and he chooses to dress up their meeting as some kind of lovely reunion, but it's on a pedalo in the middle of a lake in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they set up the whole thing of this. Early on, he says something to Gatus about oh, you remember when we used to come when we were at university? We used to come here and walk around the lake. And weirdly, Gatus and I think possibly even Pemberton just both look at him like, did we?
Yeah.
Like they don't remember that. That's the thing I find really fascinating. This idea, kind of shot through the whole episode, is this idea of a friendship that has been maintained to one level or another over that amount of time. That actually they all now have different perceptions of. They all have different memories and ideas of what that friendship was when it was 1989, and Lawrence obviously has a much stronger, perhaps even falser memory of what those times used to be like, whereas the other two of them just seem a bit more indifferent to it. They just seem like, we knew each other, we had fun, but like I don't quite understand why we're here at this lake. I don't understand what the significance of this is. And to me, the whole story is just about three people who are moving at completely different speeds and in completely different directions. But through the fact that they ended up at university together in 1989 for, 3 really intense years or whatever, they can't shake the bonds of what they mean to each other, or certainly one of them can't shake the bonds of what the other two mean to him. And I think that's an utterly universal experience. It's I definitely feel that about my school friends and university friends and all those. We definitely have different perceptions of what those years were like, because you were a different person then, and that is exactly it. There's the key line when Gator says, we are different people now. We're not the same people. Like, we've changed, and therefore maybe we don't know each other anymore. And that's the dirty little thing that no one ever talks about. Is you can be friends with someone for 20, 30 years, but what if you become a completely different person? Then how do you maintain that relationship with them?
Well, and they all sort of, although Shearsmith's character is the most romantic about their university experiences and seems to remember it most intensely, they all sort of resent it for different reasons, don't they? Because Shearsmith resents it for plunging him right back into teaching there. He feels, I think he says, like, he did a PGCE or whatever, and he never really escaped the orbit of education and all that sort of stuff. He still knows teachers that they remember together, Gatiss resents it, you find out towards the end of the episode, because he was a high flyer and a high achiever and went on this long, career path. Well, all the people have done this, who've done degree after degree for years and years and years, particularly medical professionals. And he did the process, and he was into the process, and then the process finished. He reached the goal, and he just wasn't very happy doing that. He just doesn't really want to be doing that. And of course, Pemberton's character is that experience we'll all know as well, of people who didn't finish their degree for what, because he goes into the medical reasons why that was, and you can. Some background issues that he brought to uni and things like that, but we all know people who didn't finish their degree, and they're obviously going to have very different perspectives on even if they had the absolute time of their life, socially and everything like that, which there's no real suggestion he did necessarily. If you come away without the sort of in our society what's meant to be the point, at least in a material capitalistic way, the badge of honor, you're obviously going to have a very different perspective on it, and I think they reflect that off the three of them really well. And it also leads to one of the funniest moments of the episode when Diane Morgan's character is just like, I never went to uni, got loads of friends, pretty happy with my job.
Well, it's the punchline. It's I've got a good job, got lots of friends, really like my life. Sounds like it's because I didn't go to fucking university.
Which is funny. I don't think they're making a serious point that you shouldn't go to university or anything like that. I don't think it's got that weight to it. But I think that obviously these three are like different sorts of middle-aged neurotics, and she's not. So it's a funny but quite human takeaway for her as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a nice little swerve that kind of goes, well, what price education, what price ambition, what price jobs, what price careers, vocations, etc. do they actually make you happy? And I think that's actually quite an interesting point. You brought up the Gary issue of kind of him not finishing university and him then kind of opening up and saying that it's all about dyslexia. Welcome to the John slightly pokes holes uncharitably section. The bit about the book, I particularly on the second watch, because you watch it differently the second time because you know what's coming. I don't know about you, but I've met people in my life who inevitably say, "Oh, I'm writing a book, a children's book, a adult book, a biography, whatever," and you kind of nod and indulge them, and inevitably it sounds terrible, and you think, well, this is not in the real world. This is you're at best you're writing stuff on a computer that no one's ever going to see, and you may go through a protracted process where you have to learn that you're not living in that world where that's ever going to make it to publication.
Right, and the idea of self in these cases is either something you consider promising or completely unpromising or somewhere in between.
Yeah. And so that gag lands first of all when Gatiss is doing the whole, well, hang on, that book exists. It's we're laughing at Gary because, sorry, not Gary, Darren,
yeah.
Darren. Well, if I've been calling him Gary for the entire episode,
I'll find it through the magic of editing. You haven't.
Well, maybe I've still got men behaving badly on my mind. It's that. So it's the gag of, well, you're an idiot. You're not, this is never going to happen for you and you're just slightly deluded. But that rug pull of, well, actually, it's a really meaningful thing that I'm doing because I have surface dyslexia and this is for adults and kids who can't read and write properly. I don't know. That felt a little bit cheap to me. A little bit.
What, the sort of worthiness of it, or just because I felt that bit was maybe a bit underwritten, where it's just kind of they get it over with almost too quickly again.
I kind of partly because I didn't know why it was there. It didn't really add anything to any of those characters other than to make me feel. I guess it was fleshing out Darren's character.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it should have gone. I feel like someone should have, put a red pen through it. It's not good enough. It's not a joke, and it doesn't really add anything to those two characters. But
I liked it because it gave a bit of a sense of... I agree with some of those problems with it. I think I liked it because it gave a bit of a sense in other ways in which the world's moved on since they're at uni. Like, this might be... I'm not saying dyslexia is a simple thing to solve in any era, but like the enhanced amount of understanding and allowances and equipment for it that have been put in place since then, which probably wouldn't have been very prevalent at all in 1989. I was like, this is like one of those things where you get tuberculosis in like 1930 or whatever, and you're probably done for, that kind of thing. And but today you can take a tablet, that kind of thing. I was like, this seems like one of those things where if he was a young man going to university now, he'd probably be okay for that at least,
Yeah.
So it had that sort of bit of sweetness to it. But yeah, I agree that's a bit undercooked. So I just wanted to pick your brains about the ending a little bit, and by that I mean sort of I suppose everything that happens from the firework display onwards, because there's bits early in the episode. I think it's roughly at the beginning of the episode, and then again roughly in the middle. Shearsmith's character sees this figure sort of skulking around the edges of the lake. In fact, and there's even suggestion in the very beginning of the episode that he's being watched, possibly. Which sort of ties into some dialogue near the end. Some of what that made me think about, actually, any number of horror movies where stuff like that happens. I'm thinking of things like Eden Lake and everything. But actually, we've talked before about Aguirre, Wrath of God, the Herzog movie, which obviously is about a boat trip through strange territory as well. And that makes quite a lot of hay out of, like, mostly unseen, probably threatening native people who, lurk in the forest.
Do you know what? I hadn't made that link. That's... I'm so glad you've made that link.
Well, it definitely seems like something that they all would have seen, doesn't it? And have
I'm dollars to donuts. I would guarantee at least 3 of that cast have seen Aguirre, Wrath of God.
Yeah, Reece Shearsmith could play Aguirre, I think, in a remake.
I heard they threatened Mark Gatiss with a gun during the filming, but that might be a rumour.
Diane Morgan threatened him with a gun. That's not true, probably. No, I just wanted to know what you thought about the ending, because, again, massive spoilers. Stop listening now if you haven't seen it yet, but it's probably too late for that.
What are you doing listening to this if you haven't seen it yet?
I know, very silly. So Shearsmith's character lets off those fireworks with his late wife's ashes in them. He lies down next to her. At the same time, there's a scuffle going on the boat about how to help him, basically. But, Gatiss and Pemberton are standing up in the boat. They're tussling a little bit. Tempers are fraying. The boat's rocking. And then Shearsmith wakes up in a rowing boat being rowed somewhere by a mysterious ferryman figure.
Who you've seen a couple of times in the distance. Yeah,
seems to be the same figure. There's a bit of dialogue. I think we'll talk about this in terms of the ambiguity. I think you wanted to highlight. So I actually wrote it down. So he's asking about his friends. He's concerned for his friends, and he says, "Were they rescued?" And the ferryman says, "Don't worry about them. They're fine. They're on the other side." Now. What does it mean to be on the other side when you're in the middle of a body of water?
Okay, now, I don't think it matters. I've thought about this very specifically over the last hour particularly. I don't think it matters. Are they dead? Are they alive? You can read those words either way. If he's the ferryman on the River Styx, which is essentially the conceit that's been built here, then as they're rowing towards the shore, if he says they're on the other side, they could be on the other side, as in they're dead. They could be in the underworld. They've already been transported across the other world. Or on the other side could mean they're not. They are behind them. They are still in the world of the living. It's either. It's perfectly ambiguous. That really all you need is the shock shot of going past the empty pedalo. That's what you want. That's your money shot. It looks, it's suddenly startling. Of the last we saw was these 3 people in the pedalo with 2 of them scuffling, and now it's empty. So something's happened, and we don't know what that is. Now, either our imagination can fill in that blank. They've all fallen in, they've all died. Although, how does Diane Morgan die in that scenario? I'm not even sure how logistically that is possible, unless she dives in, tries to save them, and also drowns.
Or this realm is just out of sync. The peddler exists in this realm, and it's just not populated in this realm. That kind of
God, that didn't even occur to me. That did not even. Maybe they're there and we can't see them. Is that what you're saying?
That too, or just this is akin to a parallel universe where some physical elements are the same, but they're not. I think this is interesting. So again, people go and listen to Inside Number 9. This seems to be another one of those nice things, because I took it pretty much the same as you. Right? I took it as a beautiful ambiguity and lovely. They seem to be in this sort of thing where they're like, yeah, we didn't really mean that, but we like that that's there. We like that people can put that on.
It didn't mean what, though? I mean,
didn't mean that on the other side could refer to either side.
Oh, really? So do they have a very clear idea of they're dead or they're alive?
They seem to think, and this is really not to spoil our reading of this, because I think it's allowable, and I like it, but I mean, they seem to just think he's dead, they're not.
Oh, interesting.
That's what they meant, but they say it quite humbly. They're like, this is the author's voice, but actually we like that interpretation.
Which suggests to me that they don't workshop their scripts very much, because not even in a facetious way, because if they both clearly believe that was their intention, and they've let the script go, and they've made it, at no point has anyone gone, just so we're clear, this could be read either way, do you mean they're dead? And they go, oh God, no, not at all. Then then either you would change it at that point, or you would kind of go, I'm happy with the ambiguity, which I suspect is what's happened, that they're happy with the ambiguity.
Well, you never know. They may have these they may have these conversations when they're writing it on the day, and then just have forgotten about it 3 months later or whatever.
Yeah, maybe. But the phrase "they're on the other side," you're on a boat, so you've got banks of rivers, and also we now know this is clearly the ferryman, and he's almost certainly dead, even if we haven't gotten on to the fact at that point. So the other side is far too loaded and interpretable a phrase for them to worry about it being misinterpreted, if you see what I mean. I think the ambiguity is inherent. I think I would hate to call them disingenuous, but I find it very hard to believe that they would not have seen that that interpretation in those words.
Well, they are quite. I think on those podcasts they are sometimes. I don't know how to put it. Really, sort of disarmingly unpretentious. I think probably to a point where they are actually. I don't mean this as a criticism. They are actually quite serious about their work, and they do think about interpretations a lot, and they like to present themselves on that as being quite casual about, quite in a nice way, quite laissez-faire about the interpretations people bring to it. So I think it's to their credit probably, but yeah, who knows.
Now, what I did want to say about that bit as well is, and I've actually wrote this down, and the phrase I've written down is "coin fucking great," because I'd cottoned onto the whole hypothermia thing, and when you were saying just then, he lies down in front of the shrine, it's that's not his intention. It's that's hypothermia is, don't lie down, don't go to sleep, you mustn't fall asleep because you'll die. It's, hypothermia and head injuries and all of those things where you just mustn't get tired and ill and lie down. And clearly that's what's happening. It's not an intention. He doesn't mean to lie in front of her shrine and die there. This is all horrible, horrible accident, and largely because of the weeds, you could argue. Ooh. Yeah. I've just thought this. Here's a new thought right now. So you see the ferryman character around the lake the whole time, and he says, "I've been watching you for a really long time." Is there some kind of supernatural death, Grim Reaper intervention in terms of the weeds? Are the weeds a natural occurrence, or are they a supernatural occurrence?
The lake has sort of caught them as an entity, almost. Yeah. I mean, the other ambiguity, we didn't even really touch on this, but the other ambiguity is that he's fallen asleep, and it's the oldest ambiguity in the book, in a sense. He's dreaming.
Yeah,
You know?
which I don't think's there. I didn't really think that was a possibility at all. It's either, he's dead. That's really the only option here.
Well, I think again they'd agree with you that that's what they meant, but I just mean
there's no Bobby Ewing narrative here.
Well, all I mean is if you see a character lie down and implied to be about to lose consciousness, and then the next thing you see is a bizarre fantasy sequence.
It's there for a second, but as soon as you spin back to the ferryman, you kind of go, okay, it's fine. He's not asleep. This is not a benevolent stranger. This is a supernatural character, and that's
no. All I mean is that it can be a dream in the sense that we don't see him. We don't see anything apart from the coin, I suppose. We don't see anything actually supernatural happen, and we don't see him wake up. But it's
yeah, that's true. But that's that's the thing I wanted to mention is just beautiful moment of like kind of embarrassed. I'm really sorry. I don't have anything on me. It's like you're
like being asked for change on the street.
You're searching for you're searching for change on the street is transferred to like that embarrassment, that social ridiculousness doesn't end at the point at which you die. You're still going, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have it. And it's the timing of it is beautiful because suddenly he starts, gagging and coughing and the coin comes out of his mouth, and that's absolutely wonderful moment. That was the golden moment of the episode for me.
Well, yeah. I mean, I like the way that his very heavily implied to be his wife's voice comes at him as well, because they actually mentioned in the Inside Number 9 podcast that they shot a scene with the actress that you see in the photo in the sort of shrine, and they decided to do it just with her voice. And I like the way that it's sweeter that he smiles at the end. That just before the episode cuts to black, he smiles and seems receptive and happy that she's there, and is whatever he's seeing, it's what he wants to see. And I kind of, because that's nice that's there, isn't it? That makes it a much warmer tone to the end of it, if you can call it a warm tone when a guy's wife is dead and now he's dead too. That's the nicest way to do it.
Well, they're like, again, there's something really philosophically interesting about this, which is the smile, which is, they've got a kid. They've got a kid away at university, and, obviously he's devastated by his wife's death. And the sense of him calling these two guys his best friends, but not having been able to tell them about it. Has he been able to tell anyone about this? How bottled up and repressed is he at this point? So when he dies and you hear her voice on the shore, like, he's smiling. He's like, great, this is what I wanted. I'm home. I'm with her. And there's this philosophical idea of, would you be happier dead? If your loved ones have gone and you can't live without them.
Or even just your one loved one that let you access these joys in life that he sort of says openly, doesn't he? Like, you would have turned this into a nice situation. You've been really welcoming, and I just can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. In a way that, without her, he can't navigate life, or it's not worth navigating. It's, I don't know, slightly beautiful and slightly bleak.
I suppose it's beautiful because
in
you
equal
sort of,
measure.
Well, I suppose you've just seen. We don't get to see Gates' character's partner, but he seems to speak nicely about him and everything. But like you do see that Diane Morgan's character is having this effect on Pemberton's character, don't you? Like, they're kind of cuddling up and enjoying the fireworks, and she seems to be help for all their slightly odd May to December romance and everything. She does seem to be having this effect on him and helping him emotionally, and you see something starting there, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, they have a profound and beautiful moment, which is, that they're on a boat that's gone, the whole thing's gone horribly wrong, but then there's some fireworks and it's quite pretty, and there's the bit before when she says, "Oh, you nearly made me cry," and she's obviously very affected by what Lawrence has done and calling them his best friends. I do really like the moment when Diane Morgan says, "Oh, do I have to say something shit now?"
Yeah, that's a bit like the uni joke, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say, I should say at this point, despite my multitudinous reservations about Philomena Kunk, I think this episode made me love Diane Morgan just a bit more. I think she's quite wonderful in it, actually.
Well, what a nice conciliatory note to end it on. In fact, I'll send this podcast to Diane Morgan and see if she can stand you after this. See if this episode has the same effect for her. Well, I think we'll leave it there, John, because we're trying to keep these episodes fairly concise. Although saying that, I think our current plan is to be back with an episode dealing with episodes 2 and 3 in about a fortnight. So that one might be slightly longer. Yeah, so, just before we go, John, is there anything else you wanted to cover that you think we haven't there that you had in your notes or in your head?
Al Campbell is the name of Barry Shippeas. That's what I wanted to say. Al Campbell, actually. Hang on, let me check. I'm right in saying that. Christian Henson did the music. He's very good.
Oh, there was something I wanted to mention. This, again, is taken from their podcast, but I just thought it was interesting, and it's not necessarily indicative of the writer's intentions, because I think Gatiss says it in the podcast, but Gatiss brings up, in terms of the episode's themes and kind of characters, he brings up the Edgar Wright movie The World's End.
Oh, interesting.
I can't remember his exact wording, but I think he says something like, "This reminds me a bit of The World's End." Oh,
that's utterly there. I hadn't clocked onto that. That's absolutely there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
Shearsmith isn't in that, is he? He's in Shaun of the Dead, but he's not in. I don't believe, or is he?
No, isn't it that Shearsmith is one of the main-ish characters in World's End, and he's just got that little cameo in Shaun of the Dead? Is that? Oof. We're gonna get lambasted if we don't get this right.
Hey, no, we won't. Listen, folks. You're almost certainly listening to this on a digital device. So Google was Reece Shearsmith in The World's End, and you will know more than we do at this point in time. He might have been, actually.
You know what? I've just looked up whether he is or not. But in the spirit of what you just said, I'm going to let them check it for themselves. Do a bit of work, people.
You do the
Meet us
work.
halfway.
You do the work. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
But I love that. I really.
Knowledge earned is knowledge learned.
Knowledge earned is something. Yeah. But I thought I'd mention that. Well, thanks for joining me then, John, and I hope you'll join me again shortly. It was great fun.
I hope so too.
See you again, listeners.
Take care, folks. Bye.